Hey everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to maximize the value of your data platform with dbt. Hope you all out there doing well wherever you're coming from and whatever time it is in your day. Hopefully it's a morning or afternoon. You're not spending late in the evening watching this. Um, let's dive in. My name is David Tishkart. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at dbt, and in a little bit, we're going to be joined by Jamie Nemiroff. Jamie is our lead value engineer, and we're going to spend the day talking about business value. So before we get there, requisite housekeeping slide. Q&A, right? You guys all know how this goes. There is a Q&A tab for all your questions, and we've got dbt value experts standing by to answer them. Uh, if you want to ask a question in the chat, you can. We'll see it. We'll answer it. But use the chat also to interact with everyone else on the webinar. Let us know where you're coming from. I am here in Austin, Texas, and so let's see where y'all are from. Please be kind to your fellow attendees. This is a safe space here. We're glad you're here. We want to just keep it respectful and inclusive. We're going to send out the recording in a day or so. And with that recording, we've got a little gift for you that's going to come with it. And you'll learn a little bit about that at the end of the webinar. You got to stay tuned, though, because you don't want to miss out on what that might be. Finally, we have a survey at the end of this, so please take it and let us know how we did and what we could be doing a little bit better for you. Okay, so I mentioned we're talking about business value. Here's what the agenda looks like. There are no demos today. Just to be very, very clear, we will talk a little about some dbt products, but largely this is around how to communicate, articulate business value of dbt to other folks within your organization. So we'll talk about the hidden cost of waste. We'll talk about how to maximize value, optimize cost. We'll talk about how you're measuring ROI today and what you might be able to do a little bit better. And then we'll actually show you how we do it in practice. And Jamie's going to walk us through some examples of what value engineers do. And then we'll help you get started on your business value journey. And then we'll wrap up. We'll just do a little bit of a wrap up at the very, very end. Okay, so let's get going. First, let's talk about just why costs keep rising. If you're familiar with Jevons paradox, it's the idea that as technology, as anything really becomes more efficient, you would expect maybe costs to drop. But in fact, costs tend to rise because you use more of that efficient product. You can think about fuel efficient cars. You might expect your cost to drive to go down, but in fact, it goes up because when something's fuel efficient, you tend to use it more. You tend to be on the road more. We see this quite often in computing today, right? As cloud costs come down, we store everything now as compute goes down, you run more jobs. As cost of dashboards come down, you build more dashboards. So what we want to talk about today is not necessarily how you do less of these things, but how you optimize the cost associated with them. So let's back out. I want to give you a sort of a macro, we'll back out of that macro view, and then I'll give you an example of this paradox at work right here at dbt Labs. So every day, teams across the dbt platform schedule, a little less than 1 million jobs, right? So this number is 859,000. These are jobs that are powering analytics products, AI workflows. The majority of these runs take place on an hourly cadence. And a lot of times the models that are supporting these runs haven't changed. So what we're doing in a sense is we're rebuilding thousands and thousands of models, and they look exactly the same the second time they run. So is it important that all these models run every time we run a dbt job? I would submit that the answer is no. And what's happening when you're doing this is we're costing developers time, losing focus, and trust starts to erode. So when every model rebuilds on every run, the cost compounds and credits and attention. Developers are spending time managing cycles instead of, or schedules, excuse me, instead of improving models. Operations teams lose visibility into which models are new and what's changed. And then leadership starts to question what value those extra runs are actually delivering. And of course, you don't want anybody questioning how you're spending your time or what your time is costing. So what we want to do today is really focus on how to get out in front of those conversations and think of data work in terms of business value and ROI. When we mean when we talk about ROI, let's just kind of look at a very, very simple, straightforward definition. ROI equals value divided by cost. So every decision we make about data, tools, people, pipelines ultimately rolls up to this equation. So one way to improve ROI is pretty obvious, right? We increase the value that our work delivers. And that could mean faster insights, higher adoption, more trusted data, really anything that grows this value numerator. Now, the other lever is cost. And you might think the idea is let's reduce or cut costs, but in many cases, you just can't. It's not feasible. You're paying in advance for tools. So on the cost measure, what you want to do is make your use more efficient. You want to increase efficiency, reduce rework, maybe drive more adoption of the tool that you already paid for, and that's a way to inflate that denominator. And then finally, there's that third lever, which is all around ROI itself and how we can improve measurements. If we can't accurately define value, cost, ROI, we really can't effectively measure it, right? So everything we talk about today is really going to fall into one of these three buckets. So when we talk about value, we often start with what our teams make. They make models, they build dashboards, they release data products, but none of that matters unless it creates something that the business can actually feel, right? Value goes up when a decision gets made faster, when a forecast is more accurate, or when a customer experience improves, and it's grounded in trust. That's when the business feels it, and the real numerator, and that's the real numerator in our ROI equation. So the challenge is not to build more, it's to make what we build matter more by building trust. But before you can establish trust, you really need to deliver on quality consistently. And so the way to prevent these data quality issues is the same way that software engineers prevent bugs before they reach production. And with dbt, it starts with testing. Every model, every transformation is tested automatically so that you catch broken logic before it hits the business. Continuous integration takes it a step further, where every change should be validated in isolation before it hits production. And that really gives teams confidence that what they deploy is clean and stable. Then documentation and lineage make that trust more visible. People can see where data came from, what changed, who changed it, and then they stop guessing. They can trace every number back to its source. And then peer review, just as important in analytics as it is in software. It creates a sense of shared accountability. So if someone has looked at your work, they've asked questions, and approved it before it goes live, you can feel really good about not just the models, but the downstream data product that those models end up creating. But even when we build great systems, things go wrong, right? The difference between a trusted data team and an untrusted one is how we communicate around those issues. So in software, users expect visibility. When an app has an outage or service is degraded, you'll get a status page, not silence, right? And that transparency builds credibility even when the system is down, right? So we should take that same approach with data. If something breaks, we need to make it visible to the people that consume data. You don't want it buried in a ticket. You want it embedded as a trust signal, an indicator that says, hey, this data set is healthy, or hold up, this dashboard has problems. So this is a screenshot of one of dbt's health tiles that's built into Tableau, and that's one of the ways that you can achieve this. When users know that we're watching and we're honest about issues, they'll trust more. So silence erodes confidence, but in this case, visibility builds it. And speaking of visibility, who remembers when teachers would give you homework and you had to show your work? Even if you knew the answer right away, you still had to show that work. I remember it. I still have nightmares about it. My kids are going through it today. It makes me super happy that they still have to do it. So, anyway, teachers did that so that they could trust that you have done the work. And even if you made a mistake, they'd find where it is. Maybe they could help walk you through that mistake. And data work is no difference. If users just have a black box with an answer, that's not it. So with dbt, we provide lineage for tables used, lineage for the columns used, and written proof that transformations taken from the raw system all the way to the dashboard. So we talked about quality, right? Another side to this value equation is speed. And many of you are probably familiar with the dbt Fusion engine. We've been talking about it for a little while. The dbt Fusion completely changes the game in terms of developer experience. Native SQL comprehension provides real-time feedback to users, whether they're writing in VS Code, whether they're writing in dbt Studio, whether they're writing in Canvas, right? It allows you to stay in your work, stay in flow with IntelliSense, real-time error detection. We've got hover previews, all that stuff. But in addition to that, there's a speed element. dbt Fusion engine, speeds parse time by 30x or even more above and beyond dbt core. So as you're building trusted data, you're also working much, much, much faster. Okay, so without value, efficiency burns hotter. We want to look at the denominator, and that denominator is cost, right? How do we avoid this unnecessary spend? How do we reduce risk? How do we reduce rework? How do we avoid inefficiency in people and tooling? And that's really around cost. So let's look at it this way. Who here loves paying for stuff that provides absolutely no intrinsic value whatsoever, right? Nobody wants to do it, right? So think about the hidden processing fees that maybe you pay for when you book a flight or get a concert ticket, and you're just like, oh my gosh, the concert ticket was $50. Why am I paying, $90 for this ticket, right? They drive us mad, but for some reason we kind of accept it in data work, right? We want trusted, timely outcomes, but we also incur costs for wasted compute, unused queries, duplicate work, so on and so forth. Once you see where your spend is coming from, you need to take steps to avoid it, right? So think about how a warehouse processes data. It really only understands a single SQL statement at a time. It's efficient within that boundary, but it really has no concept of a larger picture. So what we've built with dbt Fusion gives that broader understanding. It's all about having context. It knows how queries connect across your data models and your teams, and that means it can avoid running redundant transformations. It can skip unchanged work and orchestrate intelligently. So automatic avoidance is really about stopping waste before it happens, not cleaning up afterwards. So I'll give you a concrete example. You might have heard of state-aware orchestration capabilities of dbt Fusion. We just did a webinar on this not too long ago. So today, when you run dbt build, everything selected will be built, all the models, even if they haven't changed. And this leads to unnecessary models being rebuilt for essentially what is exactly the same outcome. Today, with SAO, when you run a dbt build with the power of Fusion, we know exactly what code or data has changed. And so Fusion then only rebuilds state-aware orchestration only rebuilds what's needed. So rather than rebuilding this entire DAG, we only build the models that would actually change or need to be rerun. And the efficiencies extend beyond orchestration to tests. So today in dbt, just like in orchestration, we run everything. And today in dbt, we test everything, right? We run tests at the end of every model build. But now with efficient testing, we only run tests that are needed. So if you have a unique test that already passes upstream and there isn't any logic or code that's introduced that invalidates it, we'll just reuse that same test, right? We don't need to run a new one. This speeds up runtimes, reduces costs by avoiding unnecessary computation. And then another way we do this is through advanced configurations, which can really help you customize the behavior of your sources and your models in SAO and deal with situations in the case where, a model might be needed less often than its sources are fresh. All right, so we've been talking about cost optimization. Let's just take a look at what this looks like. This is an example of the kind of cost optimization you can see with state-aware orchestration turned on, and we've been testing this out with a number of customers today. And so these are averages, right? Some customers are actually achieving much higher than these numbers, but with state-aware orchestration, we're seeing roughly about 10% of compute saved. With tuned configurations added, it's another 15, and then with advanced configurations and slimmer CI, it's about 4%. We're adding 4% more compute saved, so upwards of 30% saved on compute with SAO. So if you just kind of put that in perspective, if you're spending $1 million with DBT on Snowflake, you could save 100K just by turning SAO on with DBT Fusion. If you add tuned, uh, testing and advanced configurations, you stand to realize another 190K in savings. As an example. So this is how we're thinking about cost efficiency. But of course, realized savings are great, but it's better to have a clear way to showcase those savings and see how changes might impact your costs. So coming soon to DBT Home, we're introducing a dashboard feature called Cost Insights. It's actually going to show you how model reuse leads to cost savings in the warehouse. So you'll get a clear executive level view of savings within the platform, including granular insights on specific jobs, models, and queries run. So stay tuned. We'll have more on that later. Okay. We talked about increasing value. We've talked about minimizing costs. And then, of course, the third piece is the measurement. Are we actually measuring the right things? I would submit in a lot of cases, the answer is probably no. It's super easy to measure, new dashboards built, right? Number of tables created, how much data are we working with, right? These are really kind of fun numbers to play around with, but they add no real value. So who here is guilty of this? I know I am, right? You can raise your hand in front of your computer screen if you like. These are really easy things to count. They don't actually tell you whether your business is improving because of these things, or you're getting faster or smarter or making better decisions, right? These numbers don't influence that value equation. They're just easy to measure. They're called vanity metrics. Let's stop. Let's resolve in 2026 to stop looking at vanity metrics and try something else. How about, time to onboard? How many hours between a new hire and their first commit, right? How about time to insight? How do we go through, that first commit to production ready, right? Avoided compute. How are we reusing models? Are we being more efficient with our runs and with our tests? So these are some examples of ways that we can optimize our measurements. And if we optimize our measurements, it stands to reason that we will also optimize our ROI in the process. It's important to also think in terms of unit economics. What does it cost to produce one data product, one dashboard, one successful DBT run? When you understand that per unit cost, you can do a really good job of connecting platform to business value and start seeing whether that cost is trending down as adoption and impact go up. Okay, so to wrap things up, for my part anyway, there are 3 habits I want you to consider starting today. First, bringing that engineering discipline to analytics, version control, CI/CD testing ownership. It's really that foundation of value. If you're already a DBT user today, you are doing these things and you're probably, crushing this, this discipline. Let's talk about avoiding waste before it happens. Lineage, orchestration, remediation, make your spend predictable. And then finally, the best data leaders don't rely on gut feel for impact. They make ROI visible. They connect investments to outcomes. They use feedback to learn and get smarter. And when ROI is measurable, you can finally run your platform like a product and justify every dollar you spend. I'm thinking and speaking, excuse me, of justifying every dollar you spend. I want to bid you adieu right now and hand it over to Jamie Nemiroff, our lead value engineer. And he's going to show you how we turn some of the concepts that I just talked about into practice so that you can showcase the value that DBT delivers for your organization.
All right. Thanks, Tish. We're going to spend the next few minutes talking about how we think about value at DBT. We'll introduce our value framework, how we build business cases, and also walk through some real examples of actual business cases we've put together in partnership with customers. The goal of this session isn't to just show you how DBT creates value for our customers. It's also meant to provide a framework to help you, as DBT users, communicate the value you are creating for your companies through DBT. So to kick things off, first, what do we mean by business value? And as a lead value engineer, what do I actually do? At DBT, we're focused on helping customers use data more effectively to support critical initiatives. My job is to partner with our customer leadership, DBT practitioners, and sales teams to help you align on the business initiatives you expect DBT to support and to validate the financial benefit you expect to get from DBT. So, how does this work? To do this, I work directly with customer leadership to identify business priorities, and then I interview practitioners to document how DBT saves time and money and helps you actually achieve these priorities that our customer executives have identified. The final output is a measurable business case that quantifies return on investment from DBT based on cost and time savings, and also highlights how DBT is being used to help support your business. These business cases can be used for both new customers evaluating DBT for the first time and also existing customers to understand value realized and where you can get more out of the product going forward. Let's start with business priorities. Every customer leader I work with talks about the importance of embedding reliable data-driven decision-making across all parts of their businesses. And there's some amazing use cases and things these customers are doing with data. But at a high level, they all boil down to three common themes. First is supporting revenue, enriching campaigns and initiatives to increase sales, making adjustments to strategy based on customer KPIs. This work relies on the wide adoption of high quality data. So, for an example, which we're going to dive into deeper later, I worked with a live streaming company that was using DBT to segment over 2 million users to drive higher engagement and subscription growth. They've grown to over $120 plus million in revenue through better viewer engagement. So it's not just transforming data, it's transforming data to make better revenue decisions. It's also enabling efficiency and cost savings. How can you help your teams accelerate delivery, remove bottlenecks, and do it all more cost efficiently? Improve productivity while reducing costs. E-commerce, I've worked with an e-commerce company whose analysts were constantly waiting on engineers to complete their work. By adopting DBT, they are now expecting to improve 3 times their efficiency on pipeline builds from helping analysts develop stuff themselves, be more self-service. So speaking of revenue initiatives, now they're able to focus more on dynamic pricing modeling, which has a direct impact on their top line with that freed up time. The final bucket is building and modernizing technology. This is all about adopting technology that can meet future data needs, so avoiding the risk of creating gaps in your tech stack. An example here is I worked with a financial services company who was able to onboard their users 91% faster, allowing them to drive broad adoption of data analytics practices across the company, which was seen as a critical piece for laying the foundation for their future AI initiatives. In all these cases, data leaders are being tasked with driving visible impact on their businesses efficiently while modernizing for the future. And DBT has been a core tool for helping them achieve all these cases. But we've talked about kind of high level drivers that customers often focus on. Now, how do we actually build the business cases and attribute financial value to DBT? When I sit down with customers to build a case, this is the framework we follow. These three buckets consistently follow how customers evaluate DBT when making a buying decision. So first is tooling and maintenance. Often it's the first thing that comes to mind. What's the cost of DBT platform versus your current tooling? For self-host customers, we quantify the actual TCO of maintenance and scale. For alternative tools, it's consolidation of licensing. For native warehouse, it's maintenance for stored procs and Python notebooks. Time spent maintaining your transformation tool versus time spent actually doing data transformations. The next bucket is warehouse optimization. This is all about maximizing the value of your warehouse usage through improved governance and avoiding unnecessary model refreshes through features like stay-aware orchestration. The next bucket is operational time savings, improving collaboration, accelerating pipeline builds, improving data quality. This is all about freeing up time to be more productive, to get more done, and to focus more hours on the last piece, which is business impact. All of these cost savings and hours freed up are allocated towards the broader business initiatives that I talked about earlier on the last page. Driving revenue, supporting cost savings, modernizing your tech stacks to avoiding risk. So this is a framework that we use with our customers to measure direct financial and business impact of DBT. It's also a framework that you can use to communicate the impact you have had on the business through use of DBT. Now that we've gone through the framework, let's dive through some actual business case examples that we've built with our customers. We have four real examples here that we're going to talk through a business case that we've put together in partnership with customers. These are all anonymized for the purpose of this webinar, but every one of these cases were signed off on by customer practitioners who actively helped us build these business cases together and who presented with us to leadership to help communicate either the value realized by using DBT or to explain why future investment should be made in DBT. These are all common examples of customer scenarios we often come across when we're building business cases. For our first example, we're going to talk about a customer we worked with who's making the move from self-host to platform. This was an e-commerce company. In the business case, they expect to achieve a 187% ROI, largely through maintenance reduction from their current setup and from analyst self-service enablement. To set up the context, in terms of their current setup, they were using self-hosted DBT with Airflow orchestration. They had an internal IDE, and they were working in the Snowflake warehouse. This current solution was driving high operational overhead, which we're going to see in a couple pages. In terms of stakeholders, there are three core groups that we worked with here. There's the data analytics team, which provided BI support. There was a data platform engineering team, which managed Snowflake and Airflow. And then there were the end analysts, about 50 of them across product, finance, and operations. These analysts often had data requests that they relied on for the data analytics team to support. So some common pain points that we saw here, which we often see with lots of customers with this type of scenario: high support demands with analysts having to wait on development teams for requests. This often created bottlenecks, which put product roadmaps at risk. There was also the self-host setup was burdensome, so costly and timely to maintain. And then an overall theme was just relationship strain in terms of collaboration across all these different teams. Big picture, the reason why they were evaluating DBT was that the overall product roadmap was at risk, and this was a huge focus for the company. So as they were evaluating DBT platform, their goals were to accelerate delivery. They wanted to improve collaboration amongst all these teams, and they wanted to improve reliability. Through these benefits, the goal of this customer was to enable deeper user journey analytics. They wanted to manage inventory more effectively, and they also wanted to unlock more pricing analytics and more dynamic pricing through all this free time and through these benefits enabled by platform. All of these areas, if they're able to achieve them as part of their roadmap, would have a direct impact on revenue, which is why there was high visibility amongst removing these roadblocks and improving these operations. So if we go to our value framework and applying the framework in this case, we worked with the data analytics team and with analyst teams to conduct interviews in order to quantify each pillar of our framework. First, maintenance for the self-host DBT setup. Through our interviews, they estimated that about 20% of the platform analytics time and analytics time is spent just providing support and platform fixes. This is time that can be freed up and reallocated. They also highlighted that there are two FTs that are required to spend about half a quarter just doing upgrades for DBT for their self-host DBT solution. In total, if we look at the hourly savings here, this came out to about $274,000 that could be freed up from not having to maintain tooling. Warehouse optimization, we actually didn't quantify this piece for the purposes of this business case, but they did see opportunity in this moving forward, which we'll be exploring in the future. Diving into operational efficiency, though. So currently, analysts requiring data updates are dependent on the data analytics team in order to get those updates. They believe that through features like Canvas, through improved documentation and visibility, they'd expect to remove this bottleneck. So in conducting interviews, the data analytics team estimated about 60% of their time is spent supporting product. They expected this to go down by 20% based on their evaluation just from self-service enablement for the product analysts. On the flip side, from the analyst perspective, they currently spend about 30% of their time just waiting on these requests, and they expect this to go down to 12%. This implied in terms of time savings and operational savings of about $1.4 million. If we bring it all together, on an hourly basis, this implies 21 hours that are freed up. And all these hours can be reallocated towards higher priority roadmap items that we talked about in the previous page. So if we bring it all together, we were able to calculate a total 12-month net savings of about $1.1 million when considering a $570,000 12-month investment in DBT. This implies an ROI of 187%. We built this with practitioners in the central analytics and platforms teams. And one of the key benefits of this report is this helped them not only justify the investment, but also help them showcase to their managers and to their leadership all the important product work that they work on and that they're going to be able to successfully do going forward. So this is a super successful engagement, both in terms of documenting value potential, but also showcasing the amazing work that our data analytics customers do and use DBT for on a daily basis. Next, let's talk about another self-hosted platform example. In this case, a sports media company who is an existing customer that realized an ROI of 525%, largely through improved warehouse governance, data practices standardization, and self-service enablement for analysts, similar to the last business case we just reviewed. So the key for this customer was standardization. This is a complex business with multiple BUs stretched across a number of geographies, which completed a recent migration to Snowflake. They need to standardize their data practices. So in terms of the challenges for DBT, before they moved to DBT platform, they were using an Airflow DBT self-host setup that required senior engineering time to maintain. They had limited governance around this new Snowflake migration, so lots of unnecessary spend across their data teams. Similar to the old case, they had 50+ analysts, highly dependent on senior engineers for any data transformation work. And then this created lots of risk, inaccurate data across multiple lines of business, and regulatory risk in some cases as well to support audits. So DBT was used to support better governance and enabled self-service analysts. This resulted in cost savings, both in terms of maintenance, warehouse optimization, and operational time savings from freed up analysts and senior engineering time. By standardizing on DBT platform, this customer was able to build on reliable data more efficiently, allowing them to focus on critical business initiatives moving forward around their AI strategy, around multiple new product launches, and also around automating regulatory reporting to limit the risk of data inaccuracies in those areas. So how do we quantify this case? Looking at the framework, let's start from left to right. In terms of current tooling and maintenance, they estimated that they had one senior engineer full-time required to maintain, provide support, and keep the lights on with their current Airflow DBT, self-host DBT setup. In addition, they believe that they could probably also optimize their Airflow spend as well if they were to switch the platform. In aggregate, this translated to about $265,000 in recurring savings that they felt that they could reallocate. One to note, this does not include time to set up. They initially felt that it probably cost about $380,000 in FTE time just to build this setup from scratch. If we move to the right, warehouse optimization. Once they did a quick migration to Snowflake. They just want to get in there. They then use DBT platform to help look at model query history and timing and actually look at direct cost savings from each teams. Do this visibility, they believe that they were able to optimize their spend by about 600K through improved governance. Finally, efficiency and business benefits. So with this team, they had about 50 analysts that were highly dependent on senior engineering to do any development work. By using dbt Cloud IDE and dbt Copilot, along with other standardized documentation, these analysts were able to become more self-service. So the way we quantified this is before dbt, they were able to build about 5 models per week with senior engineering support. Once they moved over to dbt platform, these analysts were able to double the amount of modeling work they did to 10 models per week without any senior engineering time. This translates to about $980,000 in annual savings, and all this time was then freed up to focus on new product launches, AI readiness, and limit the risk of regulatory issues. So bringing it all together, this customer realized an ROI of 525%. The stakeholders we worked with the customer to build this case used this to highlight the work that they did to make this migration to Snowflake a success to their leaders. But more importantly, they also used it to communicate the importance of dbt and Snowflake moving forward to the overall business strategy. So shifting gears a little bit, let's now talk about an example of a new customer we worked with, shifting over from alternative tools. So we worked with a food company with broad operations across the globe. They were going through a modernization effort and looking to consolidate their legacy tooling. We showed an expected 613% ROI, largely through tooling consolidation and improved developer delivery. In terms of context, this customer was using Talent plus a couple of other commercial toolings in their legacy setup before kicking off their modernization effort. They had multiple data domains with 300 plus analysts supporting sales, operations, and customer experience. When they spoke to us or when they brought us in, they were kicking off a massive cloud migration and viewed dbt as key to maximizing the benefits of this effort. In terms of areas and a benefit that they were looking for dbt and what they found in their evaluation was AI Copilot, they believe could accelerate developer productivity, democratization of data and added business context could help improve collaboration between end analysts and more technical data engineers. And they also view dbt platform as a way to drive standardization to improve documentation, testing, and overall data practices. So the reason why they were looking to make a switch to dbt now was first, they viewed as key to the success of the broader cloud and warehouse modernization initiative that their leaders were focused on. They were also really focused on supporting faster developer times and improving the overall data quality that these data domains all heavily rely on. If we look at the value framework, we were able to work with this customer to quantify primarily 2 areas. First is cost of current tooling that they were able to replace. They were spending about $2.5 million per year on Talon, plus another 600K on other observability-based tooling that they were using to supplement Talon. Through dbt platform, they believe that they'd be able to decommission all of this. One thing to note, due to expiration dates, there was going to be they were going to have to pay for both dbt and this tooling for a certain amount of time. Even with that, over a 3-year period, dbt platform was going to come in less expensive, just purely on a tooling basis. More importantly, though, was the operational benefits that they believe that they'd be able to achieve through platform. when working with the customer, they believe that they'd be able to reduce the amount of time required to build new initiatives and also the amount of time to complete enhancements of existing pipelines, primarily through self-service solutioning of analysts from the capabilities that we talked about on the previous page around Copilot, documentation, and standardization. This would translate to an estimated 20 million plus savings if we think about applying this across all 300 plus analysts over 3 years. One area that we did not quantify was data quality, but this is an important factor that they were thinking about. They need to improve the quality of their data, reduce the amount of time spent having to resolve issues, the impact of the end business on making poor decisions off of bad quality data. They view DBT platform as a way to improve testing, accelerate investigations, and minimize the impact of data quality issues compared to what they were dealing with before. Double clicking on the dev efficiency use case, we were able to work with this customer to break down all the steps that go into building a new initiative or a new pipeline and enhancing a pipeline, and actually map based on their evaluation where they believe DBT could drive improvement. So in this case, if we look on the left-hand side of the page, this customer was able to break down the number of steps that go into a new initiative and enhancement and the number of days required to complete that step. Based on their evaluation, we were able to highlight where DBT could drive improvement. This is highlighted in orange, and then apply conservative estimates of how much time savings they believe that DBT could drive for each step. So if we look at an aggregate, they believe, based on the evaluation, that DBT could at a minimum reduce the time to build new initiatives by 17% and enhancements by around 23%. So this is a really good example of, putting the savings around commercial licensing aside, of how we're able to work with customers to use your own data to break down your current processes and build out accurate operational savings estimates, for different workflows that you're focused on where you believe DBT can support. Finally, for our last business case, we're going to talk about a media streaming company trying to do everything with Snowflake using stored procs. This was an existing customer, and we were able to build a business case that showed a minimum 80% ROI with significant ROI upside depending on the maturity of the teams that you speak with within the customer. This value is captured largely through improved data practices and accelerated project delivery. DBT was being used to support Mediaco's $2 million or 2 million plus subscriber streaming business. They had multiple different siloed data teams responsible for generating analytics around user engagement, ad trends, and other KPIs. Each one of these groups was applying their own data practices using Snowflake stored procs. This led to limited governance, slower delivery time, and inconsistent metrics. If we look at the broader organization, they had over 100 analysts, multiple data teams, and also product and engineering all touching data. Consuming this data was leadership, content stakeholders, streaming stakeholders, partnership teams, and to a certain degree, the subscribers themselves as they're supported by this experience. From a business impact perspective and why they switched over to DBT platform, they wanted to break down these silos. They need to improve data quality, reduce the fire drills, and they need to drive more consistency across their metrics. All of this in order to use data more effectively, to understand their subscriber base better, to drive better engagement, higher growth, and ultimately revenue. So this customer had over 70 users have been using DBT platform, and we weren't going to be able to interview everyone in order to build this case. But a common approach that we often take here is we picked two teams to interview to help illustrate how they've realized value, to help illustrate how the broader organization is likely getting value as well. So here's an example of one of the teams we interviewed. This team is a central data team supporting analysts. They're responsible for taking raw subscription data and developing reports and analytics to help inform overall user behaviors. And there are three, big buckets of value that they've realized from DBT. So first is ad hoc requests. Before DBT, they were getting over 180 requests from their analysts around basic questions or basic enhancements that really these analysts could have done themselves with a proper tool. And when they switch over to DBT platform, they saw the number of requests reduced by almost 90%, which translated to about $212,000 in time savings. The next area was accelerating new projects and enhancements. So the core, function of this team is building new analytical reports and maintaining existing reports to help inform user behavior. So what this group talked about was previously it would take about 40 hours to enhance any existing pipeline. That reduced down to 8 hours when they switched over to platform. In terms of new projects, they saw a reduction from 6 weeks down to 3 weeks. So this translates to about $132,000 in time savings. More importantly, it means there's more output in terms of analytical reports that the end business is able to use to make better decision making around user engagement and drive revenue. The final bucket here is reducing data quality issues. So previously there were about 6 data quality issues per year that would require this team to drop what they're doing, spend multiple days having to resolve. Because of improved testing, because of code reusability and improved documentation, they saw a reduction of data quality issues by almost 90% or by over 90%. So all these cases combined translate to significant time savings, significant operational savings, and more importantly, an increase in output to help support the end business and drive user engagement growth. Here's a summary of the overall findings after we conduct our interviews. So we interviewed 2 different teams. The second team, you can see team 2 at the bottom, obviously huge amounts of savings. We interviewed another team, team 1, the top 2 rows, which was a bit more mature, but they also saw value around similar use cases with project delivery acceleration and reducing data quality issues. In aggregate, this implies a large ROI of about 846% if we were to look at all these seats combined. One thing that we worked with our customer with here, though, is if you look at a very mature team like team 1, that team expected to see 80% ROI. So if you're trying to extrapolate this across the entire organization, the way that our stakeholders and the way that we worked with the leaders at this company is at a minimum, you could reasonably expect to see an 80% ROI with significant upside because there are lots of teams within this organization who are more similar to team 2, who are less mature, who can see much more upside benefit from standardizing a tool like dbt. So in terms of the big picture here with this business case, it was a really useful exercise to quantify actual value realized from switching to dbt platform. And also it helped illustrate why they should continue to expand the use of dbt across other parts of the organization. So to close things out, hopefully this provided a clear picture of how real customers are quantifying the financial value they are capturing from dbt. Coming out of this session, my hope is that this helps you think about your own business case, how you can use the value framework to document business and financial impact within your own organizations. So if you're a current customer, use this framework to communicate the value you have created to your leaders. If you're not a customer, use this framework to evaluate value potential and articulate the importance of investing in dbt moving forward. So use this session as a guide to help you build this case. And please reach out to your account teams if you need support. They have resources, they have stories that can help you fill out this framework. We also have a full value engineering team that can work with you to build similar business cases like what we reviewed today. So to wrap things up, I'm going to hand it back over to Tish. He's going to talk about other ways outside parties have quantified the value dbt has created for customers as well. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jamie. How cool is that, folks, right? Imagine talking to your management, not just about, hey, faster, more reliable pipelines and better data quality, but about real material, measurable cost savings and ROI. That's pretty cool. Probably a very different conversation than what you're having today. So I realize that we're well past the holidays now, but I do want to leave you with a parting gift. So everybody in attendance, is going to receive a complimentary copy of a new report from IDC spotlighting the business value of DBT. This report provides a detailed look at how DBT influences operational efficiency, tooling and maintenance, and business impact. And the figures that you see on the slide right now are based on deep research from IDC analysts, and that includes several conversations with DBT customers. I'm sure some of you on this webinar, in fact, may have been in touch with IDC for this. So I want to thank you if you have, but look for this in your inbox along with the webinar replay in the next day or two. And with that, thanks so much for attending. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes and respond to any questions in the chat that I may have missed while I was yapping away. Thanks, everyone.